Hello and welcome to the 25th Vermont Grazing and Livestock Conference. I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. I would like to thank the National Grazing Lands Coalition, Food Animal Concerns Trust, Morrison's Custom Feeds, Rural Vermont, and the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. I would also like to thank our partners. I would like to thank the United States Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and the National Resources Conservation Service. I would also like to thank Cedar Tree Foundation and the Forrest C. and Francis H. Latner Foundation. Thank you for joining us for the 25th Grazing and Livestock Conference. The conference is brought to you by the University of Vermont Extension Center for Sustainable Agriculture and the Vermont Grass Farmers Association. Enjoy the content.
Great, folks. Welcome to Pipes and Gripes for Livestock Guard Dogs. Very, very excited to get going on this. And it's certainly something that we here at Maple Wind Farm, I'm Bruce Hennessey, by the way, we here at Maple Wind Farm utilize a lot, but don't know as much as we need to know about making that work for our farm. And so I know many people have a lot of questions. Please put those up in the question and answer section of Whova, and we'll get to those as quickly as we can after we've had our three panelists talk. We're going to start out with Marc Cesario. I am going to I'm going to be the moderator. I will ask any leading questions, but I will let the panelists introduce themselves and what they do. So Marc, take it away.
Thank you, Bruce. Yep, my name is Marc Cesario, and my wife Cheryl and I operate Meeting Place Pastures. We're in Cornwall, Vermont, right next to Middlebury. We run on about 1,500 acres right now. Our main enterprise is custom grazing of cattle. So we don't own any cattle. It's all mostly under contract, but we do own our flock of sheep. This is our 5th year with the sheep. This year we'll be exposing about 300 ewes. They're hair sheep, and so yeah, we have donkeys so far as our guardians, but actually I'll tell you why, and we're moving on to a dog come February. So when we first started with the flock 5 years ago, the flock was rather small. It was about, I think it was about 30 ewes to start with, and we were all running in electric netting at that time. And so I saw on Craigslist an ad for donkeys, for a mother and daughter donkey that had come from out west, and they were $500. So I said, all right, that sounds good to me. I don't have to feed them anything differently and deal with the dog. So we bought the donkeys, and the 2 donkeys at the time, and they were living with the flock in the netting, and we used the netting for about the first two years, and I'll say, I mean, with the netting and the donkeys, we never had predation loss. Now, whether that was for the donkeys or for the netting, I can't fully say, or if it was a combination of the both. I do know there's someone just in the neighboring town that uses netting, and they have had coyote predation in the netting, saying that the coyotes have jumped over the netting or gotten in somehow. So I would gather that we have the same coyotes as they do, and so we had no predation issues to coyotes with the netting and the donkeys. Though at times, if we did bring the flock into winter, and they were in a barn, then they were sort of they're housed together at the same time. So it's a mother and daughter that we had, And I would say that the challenges that we'd have would be if they went into heat, they would get a little aggressive and wild with the sheep. They would often, I mean, the donkeys would be, running around a little bit more active. At times they would be trying to bite the sheep, just pick the sheep up by the wool and kind of swing them around, not necessarily trying to like hurt them. I think just kind of trying to play with them. So, that could lend itself to, to a problem. Now, I mean, at one point we did have a ewe with a broken leg. I don't know what happened to it. Could it have been a donkey? It absolutely could have been. I can't say for sure. And so also too, when we were lambing in that first year too, we had the donkeys in with them while they were lambing, which, and again, I don't have any direct evidence whether there was problems or not, but we'd had a couple lambing issues that I could have attributed to potential, donkeys. And again, maybe the donkeys weren't actively trying to injure the lambs or hurt the lambs, but just sort of being in with them at the time. So, we kind of moved towards when we started lambing, in more recent years, we've removed the donkeys from the flock when we are lambing. We now do lamb on pasture. Our lambing date starts May 20th. So, so at that time we'd started removing the donkeys. And also, I guess about 3 years ago too, we started using the flurd, because we got sick of electric netting, and we were really trying to actively grow the flock. And I didn't want to use netting anymore. So we thought that if we went towards the flurd with the donkeys, that might help, so that having cattle in with the flock and the donkeys, at any given point, we'd have about 50 stalkers or fat cattle in with the flock. And we got away with that for a few years as well. We didn't really have any predation issues, maybe the first year that we moved to that. And this was, again, our perimeter fencing at that point was somewhere between 3 and 5 strand high tensile. Again, maybe because we were lambing a little bit later, there was other things for the coyotes to eat at that time, and they weren't going to try to fight the cattle or the donkeys. I mean, I will say the donkeys, they're not really there to protect the sheep. They're there to protect themselves. And so really they only sort of protect the flock sort of de facto. So, they're not like a dog, where the main goal is to protect the flock. So, so basically the cattle and the donkeys were just kind of protecting the flock sort of de facto, and us sort of moving on a daily basis and potentially maybe sort of breaking up the patterns. We got away with it. However, a year ago or so, we started having more predation issues. And then this year we had too many predation issues, in my opinion. So we removed the donkeys completely and just went to the flock and weren't doing the flurd anymore. And I ran the flock in high tensile during the day. And then every night I set up a night pen for the flock. And just, for about the 300 ewes, we just used 100 and whatever 26 foot electro netting. And every night with our collies, we herded the flock into the netting, and then during the daytime we let them out. And so once we started doing that again, we went to zero predation issues. So would I use donkeys? We have a down payment on a dog coming out of Minnesota, and it's coming to us in February. So that's the direction that we're moving. So basically that's been my experience with the donkeys for better or for worse. The benefits are, right. They eat the same thing as the sheep do. But I would say that the benefits for trying to grow the flock and trying to have a flock that's not in netting, they didn't work out for us. So we do still have the 4 donkeys. They're mostly just kind of pets now for our daughter and her friends. So
Marc, if I could break in, you have just a minute left or so.
Yeah.
What about donkeys getting too fat on the lush grass that you have on your pastures? Was that an issue at all?
I never experienced that. I mean, our donkeys we haven't had any issues with any sort of medical issues, vet issues. I haven't had to intervene with them on that end. They've been pretty low maintenance. So I don't think they didn't get too fat that caused any problems. Because yeah, I mean we are, managing for high quality pastures. And so, they're also getting moved depending on where they were getting moved between a day or even sometimes just once a week, depending. I see a question, are there standard donkeys? Yeah, there's 3 standard donkeys and one mini donkey. Now I will say that these are, even though my first 2 donkeys, they came from out west. I mean, I'm not going to call these wild burros, so I have heard better luck with someone maybe getting a wild burro out of a BLM, donkey sale, from out west, that where these might be a little bit more aggressive and aren't sort of domesticated. So I have heard more, positive experience with donkeys, in that case, rather than, sort of a domesticated donkey like we have, I mean, so yeah.
Great, Marc. Thanks so much. Please stay on the line so we can ask more questions of you before the end. We're going to move on to Susan Beal, and I'll let her introduce herself as well.
Hey guys, I'm Susan Beal. I was in West Central Pennsylvania for almost 30 years, and now I find myself back up in Southern Ontario. I'm going to approach this from a little broader perspective. I guess I was a shepherd in Pennsylvania because I had my Jacob sheep and stuff there. But I'm really fortunate to have grown up with some really phenomenal dogs and some really phenomenal and exceptional dog people. And I'm also really been in a fortunate position of working with a lot of different herds and flocks and a variety of other dogs, livestock dogs and working dogs. And so that's the perspective that I bring to this, having had dogs and worked with a variety of different dogs. I think one of the things that we need to understand when we're looking at what kind of guardian animal that we need is what kind of guardian animal do we need? So we need to think about, what the animals that are being guarded are. We need to look at what the predator pressure is. You need to think about how big your space is. And you also need to think about the other human kind of factors and that sort of thing. The biggest thing that I found is that, particularly with dogs, but also with other species, I find that we sometimes expect them to come sort of ready built for what their job is, and in some situations that works okay, and in other situations we really need to realize that it's going to take a lot of patience and a lot of observation and a lot of sort of molding and modeling. We can talk later in the session about things that we might want to look at when we start looking at a puppy, the kind of things that might make those dogs good for your situation, the kind of things that might make them okay for your situation, but you certainly don't want to put them in the breeding pool. But the thing that really makes a difference is your ability to be observant and the ability to really see what's happening and be able to model and mold things. I think I've had experience with a fair number of species of guardian creatures. There was some discussion earlier when we were talking about this session about geese, and there's a lot of people that would like to have geese as guardians, and I think that we need to recognize, again, it depends on the situation and what the species of predators that you have, and also the predator pressure that you're under. But the biggest mistake that I see when people decide that they're going to have geese is that they decide they're going to have geese, and so they have a whole bunch of them, and the geese just go off and do geesely things, and they set up their guardian relationship within their group, but they could care less about the chickens or other things that they're put out there with. So the one of the I can think 9 times out of 10 when folks are having trouble with geese as guardians, it's because they've got more than 1 or 2 geese expecting them to do that job. Unless we have questions as the hour unfolds, let's put geese on the shelf. Maybe folks could give an indication in the chat box if they're using geese or that sort of stuff. Donkeys, I was just in the process of typing a note. Marc's experience with the donkeys may also have paralleled the whole situation with the experience with dogs. It depends a lot on the temperament of that individual donkey, just as though we have lots of breeds of livestock guardian dogs that theoretically should be able to guard, but some of them don't have the temperament to do that. Some of them are shy rather than the aloof that we want, those sorts of things. And as we become observers, we're able to look and decide, whether this is the animal that suits for our flock. The other thing that we don't tend to realize when we're looking at guardian dogs is it takes probably 2 to 2.5 years for a dog to grow into itself. And so I see a lot of situations where we sort of have immature, unsupervised dogs that are out there just even finding themselves, and they're being juvenile delinquents, and the humans aren't giving them a very helpful modeling and corrections and that sort of stuff. And the dogs that are kind of on the pushy end of juvenile delinquency can really disrupt the situation. And some of those dogs, we may find that we've raised them up and now they're, if they start to be really pushy and aggressive at 4 or 5 months of age, that should be a warning that that's not the kind of dog that's likely going to grow out of his playful chasing kind of thing. If they start to do that maybe at 10 months of age, that tells me that dog has a longer fuse and he's likely to grow out of those things. So we need to be able to work in that in that sort of interrelationships and in for the long run as far as determining whether this dog is going to work for you. The other questions and things that I get a lot of questions and have a lot of conversations about are basic stuff. For those of you who know me, I'm a holistic veterinarian. I'm a dinosaur. I graduated in 1987 and for over 25 years have used nothing but alternative medicine in my practice. I haven't dispensed an antibiotic for 26 or whatever years it's been. So I'm not the queen of let's vaccinate, let's do this, let's do that. The other thing, but I do suggest that for dogs we need, and for hoof stock, we may need to think about putting a rabies vaccine in them in certain geographical areas. The other issue that we end up talking a lot about is feeding. And a lot of our producers want to feed, the chicken guys want to feed stuff that doesn't go to market. The cattle guys want to feed stuff that isn't a high market capacity thing. And it's pretty easy to formulate a diet for these guys. But the thing that people forget is that we need to deal with the calcium phosphorus ratio of feeding a meat-based diet or a raw meat-based diet. So meat on itself is low in calcium, and we need to supplement either with bone meal or actually nutritional bones that they eat, not bones that they chew around and play with. And so that's the other thing that there's lots and lots of room for conversation. The other question that we always get into too is that whole business of spaying and neutering and managing heat cycles and breeding and stuff. And I think there's a lot of dogs out there that are being guardian dogs that are doing a good job but probably don't deserve to be parent stock. And I think there's some dogs that'll work for situations that because of behavioral issues or tendency issues, we don't want those dogs back in our breeding pool, building that tendency, say to over juvenile delinquency, mouthiness or into shyness and that sort of stuff. So I think there's lots of room for discussion, and I'm just happy to let's see where the discussion goes later.
Thanks, Sue. That's great stuff, and we're keeping people on a tight leash in terms of time here today, but I know we have a lot of questions for you. One in particular that's coming through is about chicken backs. which have dietary bone in them, being a good source of calcium.
Chicken backs can be a good source of calcium. They tend to be not as high in calcium as, say, like a chicken wing or a chicken wingtip, or pork neck bones work really well. If you've got a butcher that'll take, if you're not using your neck bones in cattle for anything, or if you've got a butcher, the thing that is beautiful is the guys that peel the ribs out. You know, so you look in the offal bucket or the compost bucket, and you got all these beautiful rib racks. If you just run those through a bandsaw and make them, you know, about yay. Well, it depends on the size of your dog. I mean, for a like a 80-90 pound dog, you know, make them about yay. Make them about yay when you're trying to teach the dog to eat bones. And that can work really great. And that's something that a lot of times ends up, you know, it ends up in the compost, sadly. The bones that don't work are like the really shin bones and those really hard bones. Those are recreational bones. They can chew on them, but they're not going to eat them up and digest the stuff.
Great. So we're going to move on. Thanks so much. We're going to move on to Dave Kennard, and we'll let him introduce himself. There he is.
All right. Hi. We on now?
We are.
Good. All right. So yes, I'm going to talk today about llamas, but I just want to give you a little background. I think the type of guard animal you use is a little bit dependent on the size of your flock and your environment. We have a guard dog and we have several llamas. And so I just want you to understand, I chose llamas because we graze on other people's land near their house. We walk our sheep all over town with border collies. And so consequently, the llama does not make any noise. It doesn't bark in terms of bothering neighbors. That was one decision. I've had llamas now for almost 40 years. They can be aloof. They can be all kinds of things. So I'm going to give you very quickly in 8 minutes the pluses and the minuses of them. I believe that they are a definite supplement to the electric fencing. You'll see pictures in a minute. I mean, they will stand right over a ewe when she's lambing and protect those lambs from aerial predation. Any animal that gets nearby. I actually saw a llama kill a dog. So, I mean, they can stomp it to death. I mean, that's usually doesn't happen. So, the first thing I want to say is that I'm not a big fan of the alpacas as guard animals. Are you ready for that? Yeah, let me just quickly, I'm trying to get a picture of an alpaca. That's okay. They just don't have the size and the frame. Some people use them out west, that's fine, but I really prefer a llama. So let me just tell you quickly some of the negatives and positives. So first of all, I like a fixed male llama, and I only graze one llama per group. I don't put two together because they tend to pay more attention to each other. I don't do females, and only, not to discourage you, but only about 75% of them will work out well. But when you have one that works out well, you've got an animal that's going to be around for 20 to 25 years as a protector. So I just wanted you to know that. Llamas, flip picture. Let's see here. Call the next one. Sorry. Llamas are very energetic animals. And that's where people, when I say energy, I don't mean like flying around. I mean, they read people's thoughts and energies really well. And so consequently, you have to treat them very carefully in terms of getting them to be friendly. The first thing I do when I get a llama is I will keep it in the barn a bit, get it used to me. If you approach a llama, you don't want to reach towards it because it doesn't like that. You let llama come and investigate you. This is important. Another reason we have llamas instead of guard dogs, geese, and donkeys is that we have Wellscroft fence systems and we have tons of people driving in and out of here every day. And so the llama, it's not going to make a lot of noise. Another advantage of a llama, it eats what the sheep eat. And so those are a couple of things to know. Let's go talk about benevolent energy. So I've never in 40 years had a llama spit on me once. I would use llamas because we have a relatively small flock. I mean, we used to run 500 ewes. Now we run about 150 to 200. And I find that the llamas are very capable of guarding. One llama will guard 100 sheep without much of a problem. I like to get them friendly, as I said, with a bucket of grain from the other side of the fence. You'll see that in a minute. And that basically gets them so that they get used to coming over. Now, let me just flip a picture. Hold on a second here. I put a collar. Oh, that's okay. We're just having a problem here. I put a collar and a belt on them. I do not usually leave the halter on. Only to move them is the only time. They will eat regular sheep salt, sheep stuff without a problem. There we go. And you can see in all of my pictures, and I didn't choose these just because it's that way, you'll always find the llama up front. He wants to know who you are and what you're doing with his sheep. I will tell you, the first time you get a llama, this is funny, you want to put him in a woven wire area, not electric, because you got to teach him. Obviously, that llama could jump that 42-inch net without even thinking about it. But what happens is he can't get out of the woven wire, and the sheep go to the llama. They actually start chasing the llama because it thinks it's some kind of bigger animal it's going to protect. It's very funny to watch. But very quickly, that young llama will sort of assimilate the sheep and make it part of his family. And then they become very, very protective. Let me have another one. I just can't control these pictures. I just want to mention that we extend our grazing well into mid-December. Those lambs you see in that picture have never had a drop of grain, and we like to try to keep them that way. What that has to do with the llama is that the electric fence is not as effective on snow. Snow is an insulator. And so the llama, you can see him, he is looking out. He's fully attention in that picture and taking care of his little progeny. Next picture. Okay, so I just wanted to say we also raise goats, and llamas work well with goats as well. I've been told that a intact llama will harass the ewes when they go into heat, so that's why I say a fixed llama male. The females just didn't seem to me to have that sense of protection. You would think they would, just the opposite. So, but anyway, the goats respond very well to them. So I love this picture. It's classic. That is a brand new lamb, just born. And that llama will stand right there. And the good thing is we have bald eagles here. I don't know if you guys do, but, and
just a moment, David. You aren't share screening right now. So Colin, if you could just share screen again, we'll see those pictures here in a second.
Okay.
But you keep talking about bald eagles for us.
Okay, sorry about that. All I wanted to say is that the llama is very, very protective of the new young lambs. And I like that, you know, because we do lamb outdoors sometimes. So then the next thing to do is I just want to tell you a second. I've got some good things and bad things to say about them. Like very briefly, they eat what sheep eat. They don't make any noise, you know, so if you're near other people, I already mentioned they augment the fence as a second line of defense. And they can be, depending upon what kind of farm you've got, they can be a tourist attraction as well. In this picture here, when we check our sheep, we move our sheep about every 3 days, 100 ewes, and we'll move them around and in blocks of 100. And one of the things we do when we check them, we always kind of bring a little bit of grain. I know it sounds like I'm a gentleman farmer, but it seems to work. And let the llamas get used to eating over the fence. And so when it comes time to move them, Oh.
No, you're all set. Keep on going.
Okay, sorry. I thought somebody said time. Can I have another picture? All right, well, okay. So I just want to point out a couple of real quick things. We have an interesting situation where I do a lot with border collies, and you got to work with the llama You can see this picture. This llama just started looking at this dog saying, what the hell are you doing with my sheep? But it does work out. I've never had one of my dogs ever kicked or hurt by a llama. I think the llamas read the energy of the dogs being predatory, but in a helpful way. So I just want to warn you, that could be a negative to it. Another shot. So catching them can be interesting. And when you catch them, if you have the bucket of grain, they come over to you. And again, you think I'm crazy, but you need to give a positive energy towards them, like you're not going to hurt them or anything. We're lucky because with the border collies, we can push them into a corner and the llama will always come and protect. So it's very easy to catch them with a crook. Next picture. So I have about 2 minutes left, maybe. There are, just to give you an example, I just want to say one thing. If you are leading a group of sheep down a road with border collies, you really need to have the llama at the back, because if it's at the front, like this picture, there's about 300 animals walking down the road there. What happens is if your neighbor's dog comes over or something strange, the llama's going to go after it. So we use border collies at the front, next picture, and we use a llama at the back, and that makes it easier to move. Now I realize most of you don't have dogs, but I wanted to mention that part of it as being very important. So we have a system we really like. I think that's the last one. Yeah, so that's the last one. What do I have, a minute?
No, you're just about done, but go ahead and finish up.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say, basically, I pretty much covered it, and we can get into questions with him, but I will say that in 40 years, I've never been spat on by a llama. I've never been kicked by a llama. It's sort of like, you guys probably know Andy Rice, and he shears llamas and all. He'll come right over to a llama, doesn't tie it, hog tie it or anything. He just puts that benevolent energy on it, and he just shears the whole animal while it's standing there. And it's the same kind of thing with you. So if you do get a llama, be kind and nice to it. And I'm happy to talk to you further about it, but I plan on keeping them, 2 or 3 llamas on the farm all the time. The biggest negative of the llama, and then I'll close, is they are susceptible to what we call the meningi worm. And so unfortunately, I'm not big on vaccinations either, but we have to worm them about every 30 to 40 days with either ivermectin, and then every 4th time fenbendazole, which is Safeguard. And that's, I've only had 1 sheep ever go down to the meningi worm, but I've had 2 llamas die. So that's a negative. All right, I think my time's up.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much, David. Now
Yep.
we're going to go to a question and answer. The first question that came up for you was about meningeal. Thank you for covering that. And there are also some parasites. So you've done a great job of kind of getting an idea back to folks about what they need to do to protect those llamas. So we've had a number of questions that have come through. Sounds to me like a question that came through about parasites. Do you absolutely need to treat a llama every 4 to 6 weeks for parasites? And it sounds to me like
30 to 40 days.
30 to 40 days.
Can I just say 1 second? Because if you miss it, the little worm gets going and it gets into the spinal cord, which causes paralysis, and ivermectin won't touch it. We can get into that later. And the other thing is, we only worm our sheep once a year. So we have very low worm count around places here because we rotate so often. I mean, there's an isolated case, so that could help with the llamas as well. Okay.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. Here's a question probably for Sue. Any advice for getting an LGD, a livestock guard dog, to stop playing with the stock? I have a 2-year-old Maremma, and she's very good, except that she still likes to play and chase the sheep sometimes. She'll usually stop when I correct her, but I was hoping by now she would have grown out of this behavior. Can you talk about that, Susan?
My experience has been that the tendency to play is how easy it's going to be to train her out of that or school her out of that is going to depend on a couple of things. One is, how early did she start to be playful? So if she started being playful like at 4 or 5 months of age. And I mean, it's natural for dogs that are with sheep to play with them like they're puppies, you know, like posture play and the kinds of things that puppies play together with. But if she started like being real playful at like 4 or 5 months of age, and if she doesn't correct easily, those dogs tend to be more problematic. If she started being playful later, and that you can correct her with I'm going to say a little bit of a growl, a little correction, as opposed to a rah, 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 rah correction, those dogs tend to be more successfully schooled to moderate that kind of behavior. And so if she's 2, she's still not fully into herself as a guardian dog, you know, and without knowing when she started and how aggressive that is. But if she corrects fairly simply, I would just spend a little bit more time growling at her, you know, whatever that correction is for you, you know, stop it, quit, you know, whatever you've trained that to do. I don't mean like beating on her, but I always use just whatever, you know, if you can use a feather, you don't need to use a club or a bazooka. But I would correct her and put a little bit more sort of intensive time into schooling her right now and see if she levels out with that. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does to me. Just a quick follow up on that. What about using bark collars?
Shock collars?
Or shock collars, yeah.
I see a lot of people want to slap a shock collar on for anything, and that can be a trash pile. I've also seen shock collars used with common sense and the appropriate hands and smart humans attached to the clicker end of things really well. But don't expect to put a shock collar on and have that solve all your problems. Some of the things you got to think about is the contact, the type of shock collar. I mean, the physically how it is, the contact, the range on the receiver and the shocker, and we also have to train the dogs to the collar. So what happens with the good shock collars first is there's an auditory signal before there's the shock signal, and we can train those dogs in simple ways. Not when they're doing the really bad undesired thing, you know, that's not going to be. That's like trying to train something to an electric fence when they're trying to escape. You know, you want to train them when they're calm so that they know that fence is hot, as opposed to like, oh my gosh, we have troubles now, let's make it hot. But they will do the same thing when they'll associate the sound with a low buzz and then a higher correction. So you need to have somebody who knows how to work those shock collars, train the humans how to use the shock collars, and for crying out loud, don't just expect that you're gonna slap a shock collar on a dog and, you know, they're heading for the Northwoods and they're gonna shock them into submission.
Thanks for that, Sue. Very, very quickly, the one perfect or best possible training book that you
for
would
dogs
suggest for dogs.
I'm really biased because of who really helped me in my education and my understanding and the finessing of this is if anything that you can find that Janet McNally has written or spoken about, or meetings that she's been at, or anything like that. She's up at in northern Minnesota at Tamarack Farms, and she's I think, you know, I like her sensibility. I like her approach. And for me, I really like Janet's stuff. I'm not up. I want to say Chelsea Green has a pretty good Guardian book too, but I can't remember the titles.
Thank you very much. And I want to just remind all of our participants that we have a tremendous amount of resources that have been put up on the Q&A section on Whova that many of the panelists would have put on there for our use. I'm going to go back to David and Marc with some of the questions that we've got around llamas. So David, where do you get llamas? And also, Mark, if you could chime in, where's a good place to start if you want to look at the donkeys or wild burros? And David, I'm going to ask you two questions at a time. Have you heard of anyone, or either Mark or David, have you heard of anyone using donkeys or llamas to guard poultry of any kind, or birds, chickens, turkeys, ducks?
I haven't. I will just say that the person that guards our chickens when we have them is a guard dog. But where to get llamas, that's tricky. There are people around who do sell guard llamas. And again, it's my own particular Green Mountain llamas I started with back 40 years ago. And they were in Vermont. They've gone. Conrad Grillo used to be it. But they're around. And sometimes you can get llamas from various veterinary schools and the like, where they have them for just a while. They're drawing blood on them, or they're doing this and that, and then they let them go. But I've never really had a problem finding them around there. You just got to advertise and then go and look at them. You shouldn't have to pay a lot for them. Whereas an alpaca, you pay a fortune for. So there's that.
Where would you find donkeys? Where did you find donkeys, Mark?
Well, I guess speaking to sort of Susan's point that, each within the donkey, there's different personalities, and some donkeys will work and some don't. And so maybe that's, why mine didn't, because most of my donkeys are Craigslist purchased, so, but I don't think there's a lot of, the COVID market has actually created sort of a run on donkeys, and donkeys are really expensive right now. I'm seeing donkeys for sale over $2,000. So I don't know where to get donkeys. The BLM sales, I know they have them sporadically throughout the year. There was one just recently this past November, and I think the closest one I saw was in Ohio. So those are advertised just, in various publications, but where to get a guardian donkey that you're going to feel confident about using in sort of the Northeast, I don't have that answer. Sorry.
No problem. Can you just expand for a second on the BLM? What is that? Those are wild caught burros that they're trying to take out of BLM land. Is that it?
Exactly. There's just they're feeling that they're overstocked on BLM land, and so they're trying to repurpose and find domesticated situations for both wild horses and for burros. And so generally you can buy those for pretty cheap, under $1,000. So and there's a question about minis. My understanding is that a mini is definitely not going to work, for a guardian. So.
All right, heading back to David, what is the best age for training a llama? Or could you just train an adult that's already kind of halter broke to protect?
The best age, in my opinion, is starting them young, maybe a year old kind of thing. It's been weathered but you can get older llamas. They have that reserve. I'm not sure why they want to protect so much. And just remember that llamas down in Peru and places like that, people ride them. They're like a horse, so they're pretty common in terms of that sense. But in a perfect world, about a year old for me, it seems to work well. And I kind of look at the parents too, just the way when we buy border collies or whatever, you want to look at the parents and see how much instinct they have. Just like Sue was saying, some of them work, some of them don't. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
I think it does, though. I guess I have some experience with llamas as well, actually using them as pack animals, and I find that their protective instincts are there, whether they're actually trained to protect or not.
That's right.
Yes. Okay. That's great. I have back to a dog question now. For Susan, what about the dog, the Great Pyr, that just constantly barks no matter what? What do you do about that? What should you do about it? How do you handle that?
Individually, actually, because they always bark for a reason. Sometimes they bark because they're anxious or worried or don't know what their job is or think that they have to guard like the entire block when really all they have to do is look after the yard. Some of them bark because there's actually something that they perceive as a threat. Some of them, you know, they sometimes bark because there's a back and forth reward thing going on, even though the people aren't kissing their noses and saying, oh, that's nice, be a barking dog. Sometimes they bark because we train them to bark because they get attention when they bark, and it's just like a kid, you know, like if mom gives me attention when I'm tipping things over, that's some, you know, that's attention. And so it's, I love figuring those things out, but there is no one size fits all silver bullet answer for it. And that's the, you know, that's the individual unique kind of situations. Peers, in my experience, depending on their line, certainly the ones that I saw in the Northeast generally tended to be a little flightier. They tended to be a little less stable than some other breeds. I don't mean that to badmouth them. And they tended to be dogs that if we were going to have a dog that was going to be like a runner, it was usually a peer or had a lot of peer influence in it. Now that may have just, I saw that like in the Northeast and also in through Ohio, Indiana, into the Midwest. So I don't know whether that was just the animals that I saw, but sometimes they tend to be wrapped a little tighter. And I'm happy to have a conversation about that individual dog if the person wants to get with me or talk about it on the question and answer in Whova.
Yeah, go to Q&A and maybe, and Susan will definitely engage with you on there after this session. The Q&A, just as a reminder, is something that will be around for months after this session. So you can get on there and still ask Susan questions. And I know that she'll be checking in there, and so will the rest of us. A question back to Marc. Marc, you're getting a puppy, you said. And can you just run through what your process is there and what you're thinking about as you bring in this new dog into your system?
Yeah, well, my process is that I'm going to go to who Susan suggested that we go to, is to Janet McNally. And so, you know, buying a dog from Janet McNally, I know is going to come with, you know, the instruction guide behind it and continued help, you know, down the line to be able to work with this dog. So, but, you know, I mean, to kind of speak to David's point as well, and one reason why I think we were trying to stay away was where the flock was and you know, the neighborhood that they were in our neighbors in regards to who would be around and barking, whatever. And so, but as our land base changes and as our flock size that grows, where they will be going forward, I'm feeling more comfortable about being able to have a guardian dog in there, and that there's not going to be as many people walking down the street walking their own dogs as well, which was a concern earlier. So, you know, now they're going to be a little bit more removed from neighbors and people where the flock will be. So I feel more comfortable about doing that. I also felt more, you know, bringing the dog in now, you know, I get to work with it a little bit easier while I have more access to the flock. They're in close quarters compared to being out on pasture during the season. So that's why we started doing it now. So
Thanks, Marc.
That's a great thing to think about, Marc, that whole business about, you know, you got the sheep up. You probably haven't lambed yet. You've got an ability to put a young dog in a safe place with these animals, you know, so that you can pick the ewes and stuff that and this dog's going to come having met these kind of animals as well. But that's a really important part with that whole seasonality thing and getting these puppies used to being in the group without having the bejesus scared out of them, because you put them in and you get like you get a pushy ewe that wants to beat them up or that kind of thing.
Thanks, Sue. And one last question. We are essentially out of time here, but just a quick maybe from Sue and or Dave about that dog that's a runner that wants to run away, and how to train them back to net, or how to get them trained to net to begin with.
Go for it. Susan, go ahead.
Well, I want to just be really clear that we need to figure out why these dogs are running. And a story, you know, back to Janet McNally, a story she tells one time about one of her dogs that she was just really infuriated at this dog because it kept going off the property. It kept going and doing and running and stuff. And she actually ended up putting tracker on the dog, like a tracking collar on the dog. And that dog was actually going out, and she has a lot of coyote and wolf pressure there. And when the wolf pressures first started coming, she found that this dog was taking it upon himself to go out and instead of having the fence boundary and then sort of the next layer of boundary, the dog was taking it upon himself to go out and make even a bigger peripheral boundary around their property. And so from the human eyes, the humans were mad because the dog was running away or not staying in the pasture. But when she really started looking at what that dog was doing, the dog had an absolutely clear reason for doing what it was doing. So I'll hand it over to everybody else to talk about those other things. But I see a lot of times dogs do things, animals do things for reasons. They don't, it's not like they invent stuff, certainly, but there's always a reason for them for doing something. And the challenge is it doesn't suit what the humans want or think they should do, but it's our responsibility as herdsmen, as stockmen and as dogmen to really look and start to figure out why our animals are doing what they're doing. And Dave said it earlier, and he said it when we were talking before this session, is part of the thing about choosing animals to do these jobs, these guardian jobs, is to choose an animal that's suited. You know, I wouldn't take a dump truck to the Daytona 500. If I take a dump truck to the Daytona 500, I better not expect to finish first, and I better have a really good pit crew. So if you choose an animal, a species that's not appropriate for the job, or an individual that's not appropriate for the job that we're expecting them to do, and we don't provide them with the pit crew and the guidance and the modeling, then that's why we have all the problems, I think. I mean, sometimes that goes back to so many of the issues that I've troubleshot over the years.
Thanks, Sue. Hey, David, can you spend just literally 30 seconds? You're spot on. How do you get a dog trained to net?
Oh, that's easy. Just the same thing, baiting. Let them on their own time, let them come over and sniff and hit it. I want to point out in the last 15 seconds an interesting thing for the group to think about. So I'm running border collies and I'm running guard dogs and llamas. And how do you get them to all go together? I will say that my guard dog has never, ever hurt a lamb, protected it, but never hurt it. And the ewe is okay with him being there. They actually eat dog jerky. He's right by the lamb when it comes out. Whereas if I have a ewe that has a difficult birth and doesn't want to own her lamb, I bring a border collie in and she's scared that border collie is going to eat it and she'll take it back. So it's the energy of each of these animals display. It's very, very, very interesting. The last thing is if you have any problems, Susan's going to think I'm nuts, but I work with animal communicators, and it's a great way to get into the dog's mind and give him a reason not to do it. There.
So I need to tell you, Dave, and I don't say that, I've never said this in public in this way, is one of the things that I do is hear things that some people don't. So we do a lot of interspecies communication, and I work with animal communicators as well, but I also have that sense.
Folks, I'm sorry, this is absolutely fascinating, and I love that conversation. Let's take it up offline, or excuse me, on the Q&A, And thank you to all of our panelists. Thanks for the attendees for coming along. And let's make sure to continue this great conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your part too.
Thank you. You
Thanks,
bet.
Bruce.